I often used to do work in a coffee shop around the corner from where I lived. It was a small place, but nice, and I could focus better there than at home. So I would go there whenever and bring my laptop with, as well as some other work stuff. I would usually find a nice spot in the corner or against the wall, and then work for several hours. Every time that I went there, I would also get a coffee or something. Well, this is something that happened after I had been going to the place for about 6 months or so. I remember that I went there at night. The coffee shop was open pretty late. I don't remember exactly how late, but I had been there for a few hours, and I think I was the only person inside other than the employee. I wasn't really paying the greatest attention to my surroundings because I was focused on work. At one point, though, seemingly out of nowhere, I got this airdrop request on my laptop. I use an Apple MacBook, and on Apple devices you can airdrop things like pictures and stuff to other Apple devices. This was strange, and I looked up from my screen. After looking around the coffee shop, I couldn't tell who this could be from. Now, I couldn't see the entire place from where I was, but I certainly didn't see anybody else. I had thought that it was empty, or at least almost empty inside. Out of curiosity, though, I decided to accept the airdrop. When I did, I saw that it was a photo. After clicking on it, the photo was a very creepy image of a man's face. He appeared to be in a mostly dark room and looking right at the camera. He was making a strange face, and I was wondering if whoever sent this to me was trying to scare me. I looked around and listened. I didn't see or hear anyone, and the employee working did not seem like the type of person to send random airdrops. I went back to my work on my laptop, moving on from the strange picture. I was very focused for the next 30 minutes or so. But the next time that I looked up, I noticed something. There was a man sitting at a table about 30 feet away and facing me. It was the same man that was in the airdrop picture, and he was making a similar creepy face to the one in the photo. The man stared at me in a way that made me want to run out of the building. I looked back at my computer screen and tried to ignore him. But the more that I did, the more I could sense him just staring at me. I hadn't ever noticed this man here before. I guess it was possible that he could have been, but I certainly hadn't noticed. After a couple minutes, I couldn't focus on my work anymore, so I decided to just leave. I packed up my stuff and tried not to look at the guy while doing so. Then, when I started to leave, I did look over at him. He was still staring at me. I hoped that he wouldn't get up and follow me out or anything, and thankfully he didn't. So I left the coffee shop and went home. I tried my best to forget all about the crazy situation. Several days after this, I went to the coffee shop again. It was another typical time of getting work done. I also went there a little bit later this time and stayed there into the night again. I was getting a lot done and working on my laptop like usual. Well, this time, after being there for maybe an hour, I saw the man again. I was sitting in a different spot this time than before. The man was sitting at a table about the same distance away from me as before, though. I don't know when he got there, because I certainly hadn't seen him when I arrived. He was staring at me again. I was so creeped out that I just got my things together instantly and then walked out. I went back home, and since then, I haven't gone back to that coffee shop. I still don't know who the guy was. He certainly seemed like a total creep, though. I'm just glad that since then, I haven't seen him. I used to work at a smaller coffee shop. It was a nice little shop that was sort of in the city. I lived in an apartment just a few blocks away, and it was only about a 10-minute walk, so I would often walk to and from work, and that was very convenient. The coffee shop did not have that many employees. Many times when it got a little bit later in the day, there would only be one of us working. So one night, I was working until close. We closed at 9 o'clock at night, and from 6 p.m. on, I was all by myself. Most of the time, there would only be a few customers inside here and there. This one night in particular, with about an hour left, there was just one person inside aside from me. A man sat by himself in the corner. He was not using a laptop or anything. but just appeared to be sitting there. I didn't really have much to do and just started getting ready to close. The man stayed there until about 10 minutes before we closed. Then he left. Once we were officially closed for the night, I locked up and did some final things. Then I left the coffee shop and headed back home to my apartment. The area that the coffee shop is in is sort of in the city. It's not in downtown with tons of tall buildings, but there are sidewalks and many other buildings and businesses nearby. At this hour, though, it was usually pretty quiet. So when I left and got onto the sidewalk, I saw this guy kind of standing around, like right outside. It was the same guy who had been sitting inside the coffee shop. I turned to the right and was making my way home. Almost as soon as I started walking, though, the man behind me started walking too. I had a bad feeling about it. I mean, he would have been standing around for at least 15 minutes for the time that he left to when I closed. Then when I leave, he starts walking too? It seemed very suspicious. But what could I do about it? I kept on walking home. At first, the man was trailing me by a long distance. It was a quiet night, so I could just barely hear his footsteps behind me. But slowly, he seemed to be getting closer, and I was actually trying to walk faster too, so it wasn't anything that I was doing. The closer that the man seemed to get to me, I became more and more nervous. When I was maybe halfway home, still walking down the sidewalk, he was within probably 20 feet of me. I was considering just sprinting the rest of the way back. I really didn't know what I was going to do. At this rate, the man would catch up with me long before making it to my apartment building. I sort of looked around. When I did, I noticed that to my left and across the street, there was a bar that appeared to be open. I suddenly took a hard left and crossed right in the middle of the street. No cars were coming, and after crossing, I saw the man following me did as well. Then, when I got across, I quickly went inside of the bar. When I made it in, I was glad to see that there were several other people around. Some were sitting at the bar, and a few others were scattered around at tables and stuff. The man who had been trailing me did not enter. I looked to the window, and instead, the man seemed to kind of be hanging around outside. I figured that he was waiting for me to leave again, and this was probably what he was doing at the coffee shop, waiting for me to leave. I looked around the bar. Then I noticed something. There was an exit sign in the back, meaning they had a rear exit. So I walked over to the back and then left out a door that they had. It led into an alleyway, and I followed that until I got to the street. Now I was on a different street that was 1 block over. I just hoped that I wouldn't see the guy again. I walked quickly and was able to make it back to my apartment okay. I didn't see the guy again after that. To this day, I'm not sure why he followed me. I mean, I don't know who he was or anything. I don't work there anymore, but that's by far the scariest thing that happened to me when I did. I used to own a smaller coffee shop, and I would work there just about every day. To save money on employees, I would do as much as I could by myself. Of course, I did hire several people, but I enjoyed the work, and I knew how I wanted things done. Well, one night, I was working alone. We were open until 8 p.m. every night, and it was approaching closing time. Nobody was inside of the shop at all. I stood behind the counter, cleaning and organizing things. I decided to close up shop and lock the doors just a couple of minutes before 8. This is something that I often did. I mean, we rarely got any customers in the later half of the 7 o'clock hour. Some would usually be there early in the hour, but after 7:30, we'd maybe get like one person. And nobody would typically come within the last 10 minutes. I also didn't want anybody coming in at like 7:59 and then ordering a bunch of stuff or something like that. So I remembered that after locking the doors, I walked over and went back to behind the counter. It was then that I heard somebody trying to open the door, which was locked. I looked over to the door, but didn't have a very good view of it. I just barely saw somebody walking away, but couldn't see who it was or anything. So then I started to do some more work of things that I would before being able to leave. This would probably take me about 15 minutes. Well, maybe 5 minutes into this, I suddenly heard glass breaking. It was coming from the front end of the shop. As soon as I heard it, I ducked down and went behind the counter. I didn't know what was going on, but I feared that it was a break-in. And moments later, I heard the sound of somebody entering the shop. It seemed to be true that somebody had, in fact, broken in. I didn't want to stay behind the counter. I was just barely out of sight of the front where the broken window was. So I crawled on the ground to the end of the counter. There's a little hallway in the back, which is where the bathrooms were, as well as the storage room. When I was at the end of the counter, I had to go fast to avoid being seen, or at least try to. I quickly made it to the bathroom, and then closed the door behind me and locked it. Luckily, there was a full locking door that was pretty sturdy. I heard the sound of somebody walking inside the building and approaching where the counter was. I still didn't have any idea as to who they were though. Luckily, I had my cell phone on me, and I took it out and hit 911. I told the police that somebody had broken into my coffee shop. As this was happening, I heard footsteps moving around to behind the counter area. I did not hear anybody speaking at all. The footsteps soon moved to the hallway where the bathrooms were. They got closer and closer. Then they tried opening the bathroom door where I was. After trying it, the footsteps moved back, and then I stopped hearing them altogether. I waited inside the bathroom for the next 5 minutes or so. Then the police arrived. When they got there, I came out to see nobody else there aside from the cops. They searched the entire place, but whoever broke in was gone. The cash register was robbed, and there was broken glass near the window. Other than that, nothing else was out of place. The shop was closed for the next couple of days, but we soon opened back up. I had the place for another year before selling it. That was the scariest thing that happened when I had a coffee shop. This is something strange that happened a couple of years ago. I used to work a job in the city, and the building that I worked in was a few stories tall. My office in the company that I worked for was on the 4th floor. So one night, I was working very late. I would have deadlines, and it was one of those days where I knew it would be a long one. I was still working hard at probably 9 or 10 p.m. I would be done soon, but not yet, and I was getting extremely tired. There was this coffee shop that was always open and just around the corner. I had the idea to go there and quick get a coffee to keep me up. Now, by this time, there was only one other person working in the building with me. It was my coworker Jason, and he was in his office with the door closed. I went over and asked him if he wanted some coffee, and I remember he said no. Then I left. We had this staircase that would lead straight down to an alley. It was not the main entrance by any means, but a faster one. So I went down there and left. After walking through the alley, I would be on the sidewalk, just steps away from the coffee place. When I was in the alleyway, I remember noticing a woman standing on the corner. I walked past her to the coffee shop. I went inside and then ordered. Within a minute probably, I had received my coffee and was walking back. I went back to the alley and inside of my work building. Then I went straight up the staircase to the 4th floor and back to my office. Upon getting inside, I opened my door though, and the woman who I had seen in the alleyway was standing there. I was shocked to see her. She was looking right at me. The woman was short, thin, and had dark brown hair. I asked her what she was doing here, and the woman did not say anything. She was not supposed to be there. Nobody was, other than me and Jason, really. The woman then started to charge at me. This was really unexpected, and I moved back and out of the way, not knowing what else to do. When I did, the woman then closed the door to my office and locked it. I called out to her, asking who she was and what she was doing, but she did not answer me. I then went and got Jason. We decided to call the police. In the meantime, we tried to get the woman to open the door, but she wouldn't. Eventually, the cops got there, and they were finally able to get her out after a while. She had messed up my office, ripping several files and documents, but luckily, she hadn't done any serious damage. My computer was still intact, and I was able to finish my work for the night. The woman must have reached the door in the alleyway before it closed, or maybe for some reason, the door didn't shut all the way. It was supposed to automatically lock when it closed, so I'm not really sure what happened. The door led to the stairs, and literally every door that was off of the stairs except for my office was locked. And that's how she ended up there, I guess. Looking back, it still gives me the creeps.